Now, along with that comes the time commitment, and I know I've kind of mentioned about how clinical psychology can be anywhere from 4 to 6 years. Then you have your internship, potential postdoc, as well as going on into licensure and board certification. What is up, fam? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Phil Sarpon. This is Phil's Guide to PsyD. This channel is dedicated to all things psychology, wellness, and graduate school. Today we're going to be talking about why you may not want to go into a clinical psychology degree. So I will give you my real, honest, candid perspective. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. You can also hit the bell for notifications for videos that we do in the future. Now, along with that comes the time commitment, and I know I've kind of mentioned about how clinical psychology can be anywhere from 4 to 6 years. Then you have your internship, potential postdoc, as well as going on into licensure and board certification. I do want to talk about the postdoc because there are some different conflicting opinions about the postdoc. Because there are states that actually don't require a postdoc, there have been a lot more students going from their psychology program, getting their internship, and then just going directly into a full-time staff position at a hospital or at a VA or somewhere else where they're getting paid an actual salary of a psychologist and not the postdoc salary or stipend. This is great in theory in terms of becoming a psychologist a lot faster and having to kind of skip over the postdoc process. But for a neuropsychologist or someone who wants to specialize in rehabilitative psychology or health psychology, they may actually want to go into getting a postdoc and taking that additional year. I think what's frustrating is that a lot of your colleagues might have full-time positions while you are still going off of a stipend salary, even though you could be making more money. So that there's a little bit of some hesitation for people trying to figure that out. It gets a little bit more complex when you think about moving from state to state. Because some states require a postdoc and other states don't require a postdoc, if you get licensed in a state that doesn't require a postdoc and then eventually you want to either transfer your hours or move to a different state or get a different job, there may be some complications in terms of getting those hours approved. And I've heard of psychologists moving to a different state and actually having to do some type of postdoc, even though they've already been working for years and years and years as a psychologist. The next thing is that it is becoming increasingly more popular for programs to be unfunded. Now, here's what I mean by that. Typically, PsyD programs are not funded, and so students are going to have to pay the full tuition. They may get some scholarship opportunities, but there are many PhD programs that are funded where students will get a stipend for being in the program. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of PhD programs that are not funded at all. And a lot of students don't know this. And so when you are applying for PhD programs, do not just assume that the program is funded. You really want to do your diligence and do your homework in making sure and certifying that that program actually is funded. I've heard of a lot of students applying to PhD programs thinking that they're funded. They get into the program and they're not funded, and now they have to figure out scraps and ways to actually pay for that tuition, which can be a very horrific experience. The next thing that I feel like students should really be aware of before applying is going to be the accreditation status of programs. Now, there are going to be some clinical psychology programs that are going to be a lot easier to get into because they are not accredited. And the way that they might try and get those students into their program is that they could promise them accreditation or some type of, if, by the time they graduate, the program will be fully accredited. That is not necessarily a guarantee, right? And so when you are applying for programs, if there is a school that is not APA accredited yet, or maybe their status is in process or in limbo, just, I'm not saying don't choose those schools, but you should weigh the pros and cons of that decision, because it's not necessarily a guarantee that they're actually going to be accredited by the time that you graduate and by the time that you're applying for internship. Understand that when you apply for internship, a lot of internships only take APA accredited students. And of course, that can maybe limit your options in terms of where you want to apply to school and how you can actually get to becoming a clinical psychologist. Of course, as I mentioned all of these things, the barriers and the roads of actually becoming a clinical psychologist only become that much more apparent. Now let's go into the number one thing that I think is really important in terms of whether or not you should pursue this field, and it's something that I talk about all the time, which is the financial burden of grad school. Just because you're going to get that doctoral degree does not mean that it's going to guarantee you a higher salary. And in fact, a lot of master's level therapists in private practice can make just as much as a clinical psychologist. And so if you're thinking about going to this career for the money, I would strongly encourage you to reconsider perhaps some other options in terms of making money a little bit easier. Now, if you look online, there are some really interesting statistics about the salaries of clinical psychologists as well as master's level therapists. In some cases, in some situations, in some states, a clinical psychologist is making very similar to the amount of a master's level therapist. Now, when you compare the amount of time, the amount of student loans, the amount of effort and commitment that a clinical psychologist will have to go through in graduate school compared to a master's level therapist, it doesn't add up, right, at all. And so that is definitely something to consider, that there may be some positions, there may be some places that are going to pay clinical psychologists very similar to master's level therapists. Here's the last thing that I'll say, and I've mentioned it in other videos before in the past about experience. When it comes to doing what you want to do, if you just want to be a therapist, there are so many other options and alternative options to becoming a therapist without actually getting a doctoral degree. And so keep in mind that the main reasons why people are going to get a doctorate is because maybe they do want to have a little bit more flexibility in terms of their career options. Maybe they want to do research and teach. Maybe they want to specifically work with certain populations. There could be a myriad of different reasons, but hopefully the reason to get a doctorate isn't just because it's the doctorate or just because it sounds good. Hopefully the reason is much more deeper than that in terms of what you are actually hoping to gain after your doctorate in clinical psychology. So again, hopefully that helps. This is not a video to deter your hopes and dreams of becoming a clinical psychologist. I just want to make sure that I do my due diligence in sharing about some of the cons and some of the things that I, as a graduate student, I wish someone would have told me before applying to clinical psychology school. Hopefully the advice and the guidance will help you as well. If you have any comments, put it down in the comment section below. Follow me at Phil's Guide to PsyD, and I will see you all in the next video.